Look, here's a question for you. What do you praise a documentary for? Here is the answer to that question in my belief.
Okay.
It's gotta be...
Cinematic fantastic.
Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
Bitten by a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
Congratulations on your induction. Now it is time for everyone's favorite mind-blowing podcast episode. Adventure with us as we cover Things to Come, 1936. It was written by the legendary cogent H.G. Wells himself. From the outbreak of World War II and then to the future, nothing is left unpredicted, theories stunningly accurate, and so much more. This is completely an acronym.
What?
I wrote an acronym
Right.
for this intro. Cinematic Fantastic. Congratulations, induction. Now everyone's mind-blowing adventure things.
Oh my
it's
goodness.
Cogent,
That's amazing.
From and nothing and theories accurate. So, and this is completely an acronym.
That's
I couldn't
crazy.
think of anything else. Yeah, I was just like, I'm gonna do something special for this one. But in all seriousness,
So
today
weird.
we're covering Things to Come 1936, written by the H.G. Wells himself. He wrote the script for this. Woohoo. That's just amazing.
Yes. I will tell you this though. My thought is that his novels that actually have, a lot of narrative push in it I think his writing in those is way better than anything he ever put on film though. I gotta admit.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, this is H.G. Wells' Things to Come, and I will basically sum up the movie by summing up the book because they followed the same plot. And this is also sort of H.G. Wells' history we'll start with here.
Okay, go ahead.
So, basically we have H.G. Wells. He goes about his life. He writes The Time Machine, and he launches into his science fiction career. And then toward the end of it, he's sort of taking a break with that, and he writes, he starts to write some, like normal books, stuff like...
Normal?
normal, like The History of Mr. Polly, Story of Kip's, Story of a Simple Soul, Love and Lewisham, stuff like that, until he jumps into the books that are all like political overthinking, like reality and stuff. Because especially with World War I that came, it really did peek into his mind. He's like, yo, humanity, I gotta write about this. So that's what he did. Mankind in the Making, Modern Utopia, War in the Air, stuff like that.
These are the things that he had talked about in War of the Worlds.
And War in the Air.
Time Machine, which predicts like a future world after war is over, and now we're back to this barbarism, a civilization in decline. So he's definitely got that on the mind. And then when this stuff happens for real, he's like, I got to talk about this. And of course, is he considered a democratic socialist, or what would be his political bent?
I don't know. He joined the Fabian Society, which is basically democratic socialists.
Right. The Fabians. So yeah, there's a lot of Fabianism in Shape of Things to Come, specifically the book, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, the book is called Shape of Things to Come. So basically, we're catching Wells at the end of his career, after he's finished his bout of science fiction. World War I weakened his hope in humanity, and it therefore moved him to write of the future.
Right.
And stirred in him his belief that only with a new world order will mankind survive. And after all, in the 30s, especially with, the rise of Nazi Germany, and, the survival of European democracy seemed to doubt. And, Wells wasn't a great supporter in general, but that was the general feeling at the time, was the war going on, Nazi Germany's rising, democracy is in doubt, and that's what moved him to write this book. So why is this a science fiction? There's no space stuff. The reason is because science fiction is born under the umbrella of a genre called speculative fiction.
Yes.
Books proposing events based on the core idea of, like, what if? What if there was a crew of discoverers who work for an intergalactic federation to go boldly where no man has gone before?
Right. Star Trek. Yeah.
Or, what if there was a mysterious time-traveling alien, and as the Earth assistant he takes under his wing, who protects against foes in all times who mess with the people of Earth?
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who. It's all speculative.
Yeah, so that's something that we talked. I think we talked about that in our very first episode, as we talked about what we were going to do is science fiction and speculative fiction, because it speculates. You're really taking us back to I guess what would be considered a year ago when we were talking about this. So it's coming back big time now as we're moving into
especially as we're covering a piece of speculative fiction, which is the shape of things to come, which is speculating about what happens for the future of humanity.
Absolutely.
And stuff like that.
Yeah.
So since, as I said before about Nazi uprising being well underway,
yep,
the book starts, well, obviously skipping all the chapters, setting a theoretical baseline 30 years prior and stuff in his theologies of the age of frustration. The book really starts with World War II and predicted in frightening accuracy in some places, and it's his most important prediction in my opinion. So in Wells' early 1934, Roosevelt's failure to implement the New Deal and revive the U.S. economy,
right,
and Hitler's failure to revive the German economy by rearmament causes the worldwide economic crisis to continue for 30 years, along with World War II being on the table. Fought between countries already on the verge of economic collapse and also speeding it up. So basically, Wells' World War II, it breaks out in 1940, violent clash between Germany and Poland, just like it would be.
Wow. That's,
interestingly enough.
He is so on the bubble with this.
He is on the bubble, indeed. However, in Wells' timeline, Poland proves a military match for Germany, and in real life, Poland wouldn't really.
Yeah, I think, didn't Poland roll over a little bit?
I mean, Germany was Hitler was on a roll. He was assimilating all the countries and stuff. But in Wells' timeline, the inconclusive war lasts 10 years. And, other countries are dragged into the fighting. France and the Soviet Union, not really involved. UK remains neutral. The US fights with Japan, sort of like it does in real life.
Wow.
To an indecisive effect on both sides. The Australian Anschluss happens during rather than before the war. I think the Anschluss was them being assimilated into Germany.
Yes, Anschluss. It's something that was talked about a lot with regard to the European nations. They were saying the Anschluss was basically the European nations being assimilated into what would be a Germany. Germany ate everything that it came across. And as far as being decisive, I mean, the thing that Wells didn't seem to predict, would you say, would be the nuclear bomb being the decisive thing, because there's 2 nuclear attacks which will actually affect a lot of the movies that we see going forward after 1945.
Little Boy and Fat Man.
Yes, Little Boy and Fat Man, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which of course will affect Japan so much that they create a movie in 1954 about a giant fire-breathing reptile. So of course it's on everybody's mind, not just science fiction authors and movie producers. But he said it's indecisive and it lasted a long time.
Yes it does, because of his ill faith in humanity. That's what he would believe.
Well, his ill faith in humanity would be justified by saying that in order to stop the horror of war, we did 2 horrible things to another country. So if he thought that humanity sucked, basically, we proved it. He thought that we would just go on and on and on, and what we did is we just halted it, but with something horrible. And it honestly, when did H.G. Wells die? By the way, do you remember?
47.
So 2 years after World War II was over. Am I right or wrong with the 1945 is when it ended, right?
Yeah, I think so. Although, again, its effects really did roll over down a hill.
There was Victory in Europe was VE, and Victory in Japan was VJ. And I can't remember their exact dates because I don't have it in front of me, but I in my mind it seems cemented that it's 1945. But hey, continue. Yeah,
the one thing that he wouldn't predict is the Spanish Civil War, which would begin 2 years after the book came out. He's like, oh, Spain is going to stay peaceful amidst the violence going around, but
nope.
The Spanish Civil War is going to put him in very powerful violence in particular. So
wasn't there some fascist uprising or something like that? There was like its own kind of brand of fascism. What was in Spain? I don't remember, but yeah, continue.
yeah, he does. Wells definitely predicts that both sides are going to be launching heavy bombings at each other's major cities. But his thought was that land fighting would bog down as it did in World War One, and that tanks would be ineffective, which of course didn't happen. But he thought they would be ineffective, and therefore would go up to the air in the term of submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or air torpedoes as he called them, carrying WMDs, in other words, weapons of mass destruction. It's basically enabling nations to threaten the destruction of places halfway around the world in the way that it has since after World War II for us instead of during.
That was, all during the Cold War. There was always the threat of intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs.
Oh, I just thought of something.
Yeah.
If you look at the movie, remember how there was a TV 20 years before TVs were invented?
Yes, and
stunningly accurate.
They definitely, we'll talk about this in the plot section, but they definitely predicted, giant flat screen televisions with holographic displays.
Definitely. Like H.G. Wells was the war would begin like 3 years after, but he predicted a lot of things really, really well. And I mean, like 1940 being the year that, London would start getting bombed was, if you see the movie, that definitely comes true.
The Battle of the Blitz, the London Blitz. Yeah, absolutely. It really happened exactly as he said, which
exactly as he said.
No, I seem to remember that audiences at the time that watched Things to Come, they chuckled that London was getting attacked that way, and I'm like, oh, little did you know,
World War II's gonna be the biggest punch in the gut ever. Like, World War I was maybe serious, but this is, like, super serious.
No, it's all, and you're not going to be laughing like you did in the theater. I'm serious, yeah.
Yeah, under that pencil-thin mustache. So, his World War II, basically, it ends with no victor, total exhaustion, collapse, and disintegration of most European countries, involved or not. There's deepening economic crisis due to all this. All governments break down, and a devastating plague in 1956 kills a large part of humanity, like the Black Plague. And civilization is about to end until a benevolent dictatorship, called the Dictatorship of the Air, arises from the controllers of the world's surviving transport systems. So basically his whole plan is like, oh, I have sowed ill faith in humanity. The only way that humanity is ever going to be saved from this situation is if we have some sort of dictatorship, some unity blended together under communism to get that. Which basically, the Dictatorship of the Air is communist.
He's a firm believer, I think, that technology is a natural order of things. That's the way that we create order.
Is through innovation and through a united culture of innovation, which is why this dictatorship promotes science, enforces English, and also eradicates all religions except communism.
He also says that Islam just falls straight away. But it has billions of adherents all over the world. It's not going to fall as easily as he predicted. So he gets some things wrong, woefully wrong, but many other things he gets really spot on. And that's what makes his fiction very interesting.
Yeah, in terms of Wells' speculations about thoughts about Islam falling, it's probably, you're like, oh, that's stupid. Islam wouldn't fall like that. But then you go like, oh, 1930s, what were people thinking then?
Exactly. That they would not have seen how far that it.
And we're already thinking like 20 years in the future from this point. So
we hindsight is 2020. We have the luxury of seeing what really happened.
Yeah, there's lots of movies that come out in like 1990 where they're like 20 years the near future, where it's like 2020. I think there was an instance of that, and then there was like flying cars. So
oh yeah, I gotcha. Okay, here's the deal.
Which one did the 2020?
No.
Flying cars thing.
No. It was 2015. It's a movie called Back to the Future 2, which we are doing. We are doing sometime in the far future. But Back to the Future 2 took place in the ripe old year of 2015, which you were alive during that time, man.
And where's my flying cars?
Exactly. People on Facebook were posting, "Where's my hoverboard?" Not that hoverboard that the kids were buying, where if the battery failed, you get thrown across the room. Not one of those. I'm talking about real flying cars.
Like Attack of the Clones flying
cars.
Oh,
wow. Yeah. That's sort of similar to how they were flying around in that movie. But a lot of films don't do really good with predictions. The only ones that still work have enough futuristic stuff in them and a far off enough date that we still could this day in 2023 go, oh, well, that could happen. But until we catch up with that time frame and we find out it's basically the same as now.
Basically what people were saying about The Simpsons predicting everything.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother. You could do a whole podcast.
Yeah, but
on predictions.
we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. As we said, the dictatorship of the air, it's awful weird that he's like, oh, the transport businesses are the one carrying us out, which is sort of weird.
It's technology. I mentioned this while we were watching the movie. I said that this movie is very technocratic. It's basically like the smartest of us
are the ones that are going to provide the utopia.
Yeah, thank you. Or they have the plans with which to give us all peace and all these different things. Peace through technology, peace through gas bombs.
Yeah, the gas of peace, as we see in the movie.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, they're just they establish the modern state and all, and as we said, Islam is is taken care of, and they descend on Mecca and close down the main holy places and all this stuff, and there's a brief reference to the abolition of Buddhism, and apparently there were no problems eradicating Buddhism, which is weird.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church seemed to be very formidable, though there's little reference to Protestants at all. There's like, the Protestants were wiped out somehow, easily,
Well,
I guess.
a lot of the way that you're describing this book, it almost sounds like if somebody told you, hey, there's this movie H.G. Wells helped to write called Things to Come, and there's a companion book which gives like a more in-depth elements to the history. It's called Shape of Things to Come. You'd be like, okay, because a lot of the stuff you were talking about in the book,
I feel like this is a book that you need to read to dig into this stuff, but we're just glazing over it, and plus I haven't even finished the whole book myself because it's literally like reading War of Peace. Honestly, it's like
War and Peace, page 1. Et bien, mon prince, so Genoa.
what I was mentioning was we had the elements of the air raids and war beginning, and we had air fighting in the air.
Yeah, War in the Air really did predict that.
We had that. Well, I'm talking about in the movie, and when we had the plague. We'll talk about this in the plot, but it's called the wandering sickness. And then the whole thing about this dictatorship coming up. When you said that, I was thinking about the chief or the boss guy. The chief was the guy in the furry coat who was like,
Yeah.
And then what you were saying is that the dictatorship was the future cabal guy.
Yes, in the movie it was called Wings Over the World, but I guess that's kinder than the dictatorship of the air.
Yeah.
Which is very blunt. Dictatorship.
Right, exactly. And of course, if you haven't seen this movie, quick note, if you're like, what is going on, guys? The quick note on this movie is it not public domain?
Yes, although there is some weird stuff about that where it was like, oh, it was revived up in this country, or like the US or something.
Well, let's put it this way. You can find it on a lot of platforms like YouTube.
In very low quality, though. There's lots of low quality copies because it's been copied to King to Come. So
yeah, it has. So, but you can find this movie, okay? Anybody under the sound of my voice can find this movie no matter what. And so watch this movie before you kind of get too deep.
It's on 1001 movies you've got to watch before you die. We were talking that earlier.
And we'll talk about why that is, of course, as we go.
But as I was talking about with the gas of peace, that was used on the Pope in the Catholic hierarchy.
Oh, wow.
Because they were blessing the new aircraft built by a revived fascist Italy. So basically they're like, oh, yeah, we're going to bless your aircraft and not the dictatorship's air. So they got gassed of peace.
Oh, my goodness. That's ridiculous.
And then they got crushed in Italy. They flee to Ireland and then to Brazil. But they're found and eradicated. So it's just like, oh, I'm going to chase you everywhere because you blessed this aircraft instead of ours.
Wow.
There's a lot of in the book where it's like, they were living in unity, but it wasn't like sort of real unity. There was like some voices popping up and down, like the artist Theophilus, as in the movie, in the book, he is also a character as well. And they sort of serve the same function, although in the book Theophilus doesn't really do anything. He doesn't actually do anything. He just writes books And he's like, oh, well, that's cool and all, but it's not really correct. Anyway.
Is it what we're discovering, the part of the writing that we're discovering is his writing?
Yes.
Okay. So it's kind of like him just writing this. So he doesn't really have the voice that he does in the movie.
See, the thing is, the book is basically a frame story, considering apparently the protagonist has this information passed on from the notes of a Dr. Philip Raven, his sort of friend.
Raven, yeah.
And Dr. Philip Raven gets it from this, like, he has this vision or dream or something.
Well, if you think about it, it kind of is, it's a prophecy. And prophecies are very often given in dreams. So that he's kind of, I mean, H.G. Wells is kind of prophesying that this could happen. It really could.
The interesting thing, continuing with talking about the religions eradicated, is the fate of the Jews. In this history, because, Poland humbled Germany, there's no organized Holocaust, and instead there's just unorganized persecution, and they ultimately become assimilated. So it's interesting how that changes according to his theories.
Instead of just being predictive, if you think about it, could you put The Shape of Things to Come, the book, maybe a lesser extent of the movie, could you think about it? I know it's a predictive, but doesn't it kind of fit into a lot of alternate history novels? Because what they do is they take certain moments in time and say, what if this happened instead of that? So if you read it, knowing what we know about World War II and everything going on, if things happened a little bit differently...
Butterfly effect. The tiniest things can change the whole timeline.
Yeah. And a lot of things hinge on certain really important historical points. It's a lot of people...
Like how the World War II turns out, and it destroys humanity.
There's a book called The Man in the High Castle, which is about what if the Nazis won World War II.
And there was one, I think, that was called A Brave New World by, Huxley is his surname, I think?
Aldous, yeah, Huxley. Yeah, that is a future that, it reminds me of, if you thought about the world of the future that's in Things to Come, at the end of the movie, where everything looks like, a shopping mall, giant hotel. Think of it this way. Brave New World, it wasn't a alternate history yet. It was kind of a predictive. If the future world goes a certain way, this is how, people could, and it has some predictive elements in it too. We won't necessarily go into that, but we may name drop it now and again with how it affects, some of the movies going forward.
Yeah, but this dictatorship, man, is along with all the stuff, when the dictatorship executes a subject, which is funny, they have to execute subjects, they give the condemned a chance to take a poison tablet modeled on the hemlock given to Socrates. So basically they're like, oh, we're going to be kind to you, and either you can kill yourself or we kill you. So, well, I guess, cool. And it says here, Wells rejected the achieving of classless society via a Marxist dictatorship of the proletariat. Yeah, and proposed the working class pulled upwards and ultimately eliminated, leaving a humanity entirely composed of middle-class intellectuals. And that certainly seems to be sort of this, I think communism would be like, trying to pull up the poor and down on the rich or something.
Yeah, it's everybody being the same. Which is it's a lofty goal. I'll admit that.
And again, yeah, this is sort of what the dictatorship of the era is going. I want everyone to be the same, and everyone will be middle-class individuals. There would have to still be physical labor by the world's youth, though, who undergo 2 years of labor conscription instead of military conscription because they don't need any military force anymore.
Right. There are some countries, specifically, I thought, when you said that, I thought about Israel, because Israel has a 2-year military conscription. If you meet an Israeli youth of a certain age, if they have, survived that military training, they will know some basic, martial arts even.
Yeah, and from a, looking on this standpoint, being from the opposite, definitely opposite thoughts here. H.G. Wells, pessimistic and cynical about humanity, and it's he needs to be entirely replaced with a new front. Is this a good future? I don't know.
Well,
I don't really think so, because, there's I don't know if this is exactly a good future, a good reality, because, we have this communist overtaking of the whole world, and, bluntly doing all the things, having to execute people, having to eradicate all religion, and all the things. Does that seem like a good thing from a, U.S. standpoint?
Well, there was a lot of technological achievement. But I think that you can have all those things. What does keeping people in line mean? He was for a benevolent dictatorship, but people have throughout history railed against that. People, for better or worse, want ultimate freedom. Herbert George Wells, his whole thing was, we just need the right kind of ultimate leader. And I'm like, I don't know about that. So I can't completely agree with that.
Yeah, but the one advantage it seems to be is that there's no violence needed, and as we said, a gas of peace that unconsciouses everyone. Right. I guess if that's a verb,
it knocks everybody out, and when they wake up, they're still kind of almost like docile. Like they're not real big on violence after they kind of wake up a little bit, so they kind of come to their senses.
And there's a lot of bloodless battles that come with that, which is how the dictatorship of the air has to deal with, and gas of peace, everyone.
Well, we see a warlord in the movie. I guess he like shoot himself or something like rather than go with them.
Yes.
Okay. So in that way, it kind of shows that the last vestiges of the old world and its barbarism, and now we can just be all togas and skirts and live in giant shopping malls with magical Star Trek stuff everywhere.
Yeah, and to close off the book talk, there's no space gun in the book. Dr. Raven's work trails from when the crest is attained, what grandeur of life may not open out to man. I have not seen, nor ear heard, nor entered into the mind of man to conceive, for now we see as in a glass darkly, and then it ends. But overall, the book is very long and boring to me, and I didn't finish it. In the book, what character and dialogue is added is flat and bland unless, they're preaching and teaching what H.G. Wells is saying.
Yeah, and they definitely do. They almost become...
They're there to serve as philosophies rather than adding characters.
They're mouthpieces for the author a lot, and you can tell when authors do that a lot. And this is not just an H.G. Wells thing, because he didn't always do this. I think that as, like you said, as he saw the horrors of World War I, and he was kind of in his later years, I think that he was kind of going, the stuff that I talked about that was speculative and that was, science fiction.
Yeah, time to focus on the real world, and this would be the last stuff he does till his death.
Yeah, and but we ultimately remember H.G. Wells for a lot of different things. We do need to remember him as a man who had high political ideas and was very interested in that kind of thing and very dedicated. We also do remember his early science fiction, and we enjoy that. And it did have his philosophies and things that he wanted to get across in those books. We still see that to this day. It wasn't like he was political toward the end, but he wasn't political toward the beginning. It's just that he was more into, like, I think he veiled it and masked it more with like plot and narrative and character.
And especially when he took a break from that to like go to normal, comic books. Well, not comic books,
not
comedic
novels.
books.
Yeah.
I don't mean comic books. I mean comic books.
Yes, comic as far as funny. Got it.
As funny as you found that joke. So
I love it.
To get into the production, due to putting his name and title in big font on the posters, because it says H.G. Wells Things to Come on it, and the producer's credit is in small font, but just under that you can't really see it. It can make you falsely believe that he had like total control over it. But he didn't really. He didn't have total control over it.
Wait. What about the script?
He did have the script, which again he wrote terribly well. I'll have to agree. It's a really well done script. But he did do that. The one thing that the two privileges he did get was one, that no one would rewrite his script.
Yes.
No one would touch a single word he wrote.
Even the actor, that some of the actors even said please, and he was like, no.
He's like, please, I don't like this line, and he's like,
nope.
No, you're gonna say it just like this. I misspelled it purposefully.
No.
The grammar is wrong. Anyway, the second thing would be that he can veto anything in the production that he doesn't like.
Wow.
If he's just like, don't like that, vetoed immediately. So it's sort of like this Orson Welles type privileges, which is interesting to see.
Yeah, he also is H.G. Wells the reason why we don't have Ernst Thiesecker as Theotokopoulos?
Oh yeah, that was a thing. Ernest Thiesecker was going to be in this movie, but he decided against it because he's like, you know what, you're too flowery. I don't like you.
Yeah, kind of posh. But the thing is, though, in that way, I think the actor who plays Theotokopoulos, and also he plays the chief in the kind of the warlord kind of era of the movie. There's three, I think 2 or 3 eras that the movie goes through. And there's one of them that takes place kind of in a post-apocalyptic kind of warlord kind of era.
Humanity has fallen apart.
A de facto leader named the Chief, and Cedric Hardwicke plays him, and he does a decent job at that. But I honestly, right now, I'm wondering. So I've read articles where people said, "Oh, Ernst Theissiger would have been great," but honestly, I kind of see what they did there. I don't think I could have seen Ernst Theissiger as that part.
However, he does more like look Star Wars, the general dude who was like over everything apparently.
Oh, okay.
He looks a lot like him.
Oh, you're talking about Tarkin.
Yeah, General Tarkin. He sort of looks like General Tarkin.
Played by Peter Cushing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very funny. Although again, you'd probably die before that movie came out because again, he's very old looking.
Yeah, we are definitely going to get some Peter Cushing in the future. Just be on the lookout, listeners.
Yeah, but the rough cut reputedly ran to 2 hours, but released in the UK first as 1 hour 48, and then later the 97 minutes, and then 96 minutes in the US that we have today. So basically, it's like, oh, cool, sends to the motion picture production boards, and then it's like, hey, this is 2 hours, please cut it down a little bit. That's like 2 hours, man, that not all this needs to be here.
What was the parts that they cut? I mean, did...
The thing is, I couldn't really find the deleted scenes for any mention of the deleted scenes on the internet. It's just the thing.
Yeah.
Because I wrote things to come, and it's like, oh, you mean the thing? And I'm like, no, I don't mean the thing.
Yeah, the 1981, 1982, yeah.
I don't mean that one.
Right.
But the script contains many scenes that were either never filmed or no longer exist, although there was cut footage of stuff not in the scripts. Apparently there was, like, a scene with, like, the boss has, like, a luncheon sort of scene, and it's like, oh, that's not in the script, but it somehow peeked over but was not shown. We do have mention of the Hungarian abstract artist and experimental filmmaker Laszlo Moholy-Nagy.
Okay.
Yeah,
God bless you.
Yeah, that's a funny name. He was commissioned to produce some of the effect sequences for the rebuilding of every town. He really took the abstract light show approach for the effects, but he eventually didn't make the cut.
Yeah.
He did make like 4 more sequences, which had been discarded as well.
What was that? The future?
That was the future town. Yeah. That was like with the model work and the rebuilding of every town, and we loved that part.
Yeah.
Just for the people who did the special effects in this movie, the model work, just give them claps, please. Let's just.
Yeah. For the time. I mean, we might look at it now and go, okay, yeah, right. But
yeah, we respect this movie for the scale that everything was at. Like, seriously, going into this movie, you'd, like, think it's like, oh, so far it's, like, sort of boring in a way, there's nothing to latch onto and stuff, but there's definitely lots for your eyes to see at this moment, because it's, like, we were, like, there's, like, big drills and stuff, like, all creating stuff, like, making the buildings and, like, transferring everywhere. Like, Willy Wonka, the beginning of Willy Wonka we compared it to, because it looked like, the chocolate was being formed and stuff. It's just awesome looking. And, like, you can think of, like, the scale of everything. Because we were like, this stuff must have been huge when, like, put into perspective of how tiny these humans are.
Yeah, and
this drill that's, like, literally the size... Okay, count how many elephants you can fit in the earth.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly that.
Yeah, no, it was very amazing to watch, because we're like, this is 1936 and they're doing this now.
Yeah, this is a large scale epic production of it. Like, think of, like, I don't know, Don Quixote or like Beowulf or something. It's along the lines of those.
Yeah.
In terms of scope.
Well, it was compared unfairly, I would say, to Metropolis, but H.G. Wells was not a fan of Fritz Lang, and he was not...
Yeah, he was like, you see this movie, Metropolis? Let's not do that. Let's do something different.
Yeah, and he said that Metropolis was the silliest film he had ever seen, and I was like...
Though we definitely will have to owe up to Metropolis for some of its effects seeming to look a lot like this movie, and there's lots of similarities as well.
There are.
With the scope.
There are.
And with the scope and with the premise.
Yeah, and the predictive nature of, and I don't know, understand why he wouldn't have liked it, because it's about the haves and the have-nots and the lower, it's got classism and things in it. I thought would have tickled his political fancy, but hey, I guess he's just got a thing against Metropolis. But Metropolis would be the closest thing that I could compare this to.
Another thing to compare this to is 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, we have sci-fi historian Gary Westfall going into reception, says Things to Come qualifies as the first true masterpiece of science fiction media, and those who complain about its awkward pace and uninvolving characters are not understanding well its messages, which is that the lives and actions of individuals are unimportant when compared to the progress of the destiny of the human race, and the greatest ancestor of Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. So,
yes.
And that's pretty high praise. After all, the Rotten Tomatoes for this, 93% based on 28 reviews, 4.6 out of 10, it says, though it says 90 now, but as of now, it's 1% away from 2001: A Space Odyssey. So consider that.
Yeah, at Rotten Tomatoes, you have to take it with a grain of salt.
Cum grano salis.
Cum grano salis. Thank you.
But the interesting thing is that at 2001's earliest stages, co-writer Arthur C. Clarke had Kubrick watch this movie as an example of a grounded science fiction film. He disliked it though. He was like, he gave it the Metropolis treatment. You know, H.G. Wells was like, you see Metropolis? Let's not do it like that. Let's do something else along the same lines. And then he was like, oh, you see Things to Come? Let's not do it like that. Let's do something else. And then also, here's another list. There was a movie called Solaris.
Yes.
Which was made based on the director didn't like 2001: A Space Odyssey. So basically, if you're gonna watch this movie, watch it along with Metropolis and 2001: A Space Odyssey and Solaris, because they're all very similar and in a chain of absolute goodness that you'll enjoy.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, Frederick Pohl, after seeing 2001, he's a critic, complained in a 1968 Galaxy editorial, the science fiction movie we've all been waiting for still hasn't come along. We think it's a disgrace that the most recent science fiction movie made with a big budget, good actors, and an actual science fiction writer preparing the script, not aimed at juvenile market and uncontaminated by camp, is Things to Come, produced by 1936. So this dude was like, I don't like 2001: A Space Odyssey, I preferred Things to Come. So that lots of high praise here.
I will tell you this. Of the two movies, I did appreciate this movie just fine, but 2001: A Space Odyssey still has my vote as one of the best movies.
It's really just the characters, and then also there's, you know, the fact that it actually goes and explores space, and, like, AI intelligence with, like, HAL and stuff.
And evolution and alien life and every, yeah, it's
versus this movie doesn't even touch into space.
Well, it's very ambitious. That's a word I would put on Things to Come. Is this movie is very ambitious. I will tell you this. There is a connection of this movie to a future movie we're going to do. The producer was Alexander Korda. And
yes.
Alexander Korda is actually, he won Oscar for direction or science fiction direction for Thief of Baghdad, which is a remake of a 1920s silent Thief of Baghdad.
And we are doing that.
We are doing that.
For season 2.
Yes, this season. We're doing a couple. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, continuing with the reception, critic Graham Greene gave the film a mixed review. He said a third of the film is magnificent, but he felt that the second third, the near extinction of civilization, seemed implausible and lost interest with the introduction of the modern state in the last third of the film because of naive optimism and idealism. So you can sort of agree there that it can get drier in terms of, like, plot content, but it's certainly like a feast for the eyes and, like, ambition into this epic telling of the shape of things to come.
Yeah, I still kind of like the middle part a lot too.
But most of it is taken up by the chief guy and Cabal having this argument over two sides of, you know, the chief of every town wants his town to be an independent sovereign state. So he's sort of on the democratic side of the argument versus, you know, the other side of the argument of John Cabal, which is it'd be better to be assimilated into a dictatorship where everything is ruled on science. And he's on the wrong side of the argument, according to H.G. Wells.
Well, he's telling the story. So his theories and his themes are going to be baked into it. Even into the things that the chief says.
The things that everyone says, actually.
Yes, everybody, including Of course, I think that a lot of what H.G. Wells believes is put into the mouth of any of the cabals. Oswald, John, who you name it. I can hear.
Yeah, we follow a cabal throughout all the generations through this movie.
We also follow some passworthies, and we follow different people.
And you guys follow us on Twitter.
And on YouTube. Subscribe. And also podcast. But back to this. So the thing about it is you hear H.G. Wells's words definitely in Cabal's mouth. I almost heard H.G. Wells just talking through him.
He's in the mouth of, what he's rooting for, which is this wings over the world, as he called in the movie, and the dictatorship of the air in the book. This utopian sort of scientific thing that's going to save humanity, because it's just going to devolve into madness unless we have someone or one huge united utopian technocratic dictatorship to save us all.
Yeah, to gas us into coherence.
And this is the one he wants to prove right. So he's like, these dudes are going to be right. I'm going to fill them with what I say, which is we're right, we are cool, and we're going to save humanity.
Right. There you go. Of course, the main... Well, I don't want to say the main character, but a character we do find...
The main character we do find a lot is Raymond Massey's...
John Cabal and Oswald Cabal.
But he was also in The Old Dark House. We did that episode a little bit ago.
Yes.
He's really known for playing Abe Lincoln a lot. He did play a lot of Abe Lincolns.
That's true. I remember we talked about it. And of course, you go back to that Old Dark House episode if you want to talk about some of his history. But
that was a really fun episode, I agree.
It was. I'd call it a cult classic with our... like if it doesn't get as many listens as the other ones, that's fine, but it's a hidden gem if you go listen to it.
Speaking of classics, this movie does really seem to be a classic, and I didn't expect it to be a classic, but I was, reading stuff, it's like, oh, this is a science fiction classic, because it's, one of the 30s, only science fiction films, and, one of the first British-made science fiction films, because H.G. Wells is British.
Yes, and also...
This was British-made.
Well, there are other British films that we are going to do going forward, like Day of the Triffids. There's 2 Doctor Who movies, the Quatermass series, which I have never seen, but I've been told is very influential. So here's the thing. I don't know if we would have a lot of what we have, especially coming from Britain, if we didn't have H.G. Wells' things to come.
Yeah, and 2001, A Space Odyssey, whether the director likes it or not, is standing on the shoulders of this movie.
It is, I would say. If anything that you could point to, the connection between the 2 films, it's the ages. It shows an age of beginnings and something, and a catalyst that takes it through the years. A history that spans thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of years. That's definitely a connection those 2 films have. A big epic scope here.
Yeah, I definitely do agree. He's trying to sum up he's trying to chronicle the 1,000 years worth of history. Or 1,100 years of history.
It's ambitious, to say the least. That's if you take anything from this movie, take away that it's creative, it's ambitious, and some of the production quality of some of these things is, for the time, kind of crazy. I mean, you may look at it and go, yeah, I can see the strings. I can see that the characters are very flat.
Yeah, they're little models moving on a little tram. It's too preachy.
Well, that's from a plot point of view. You might think it's a little preachy, but just think of it in terms of if there ever was a propaganda film for H.G. Wells to create it, this is it.
This is it. But continuing with the people who made this possible, we have Ralph Richardson, who was posthumously in Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, longest subtitle known to man.
Wow.
And we have lots of different people who did Hamlet, Taming of the Shrew, and Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare stuff in Broadway's Cedric Hardwicke, who was Frollo in Hunchback of Notre Dame with Lawton. He was Frankenstein and Ghost of Frankenstein, along with Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney Jr. He was King Arthur in A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which we're going to be seeing this season, I think. I think it's this one.
This season or the next. I can't remember. Keep going.
He was also the Pharaoh in The Ten Commandments. He was in Les Miserables with Lawton and Frederick March, who we also mentioned before.
I think I think there was a Ten Commandments, an old one, not the New Color one. That's Yul Brynner. It must be an older one that he was in.
Yeah. But he was in Les Miserables with Lawton and Frederick March. He was Sherlock Holmes in the 1945 NBC series. He was even in a Twilight Zone episode, and he'll also be in The Invisible Man Returns and The Invisible Agent, and a small role in War of the Worlds 1953, which we're also seeing.
Oh, wait a minute. So we're doing War of the Worlds 1953, and he's in that.
He's in so much stuff.
Cedric Hardwicke is. What is it? He's in The Invisible Man Returns and Invisible Agent coming up.
Yeah, he's like in a Twilight Zone episode.
So we're gonna see him quite a few more times in the next.
He's gonna pop up everywhere.
We're gonna play the Spot the Cedric Hardwicke game, basically, as we go the next couple years.
So next is Pearl Argyle, who the only thing I have to mention was mostly known as a beautiful ballet dancer, which is interesting. We haven't had a ballet dancer converted film star really before. The producer, Alexander Korda, was the director of The Private Life of Henry VIII, which was nominated an Oscar for Best Picture and launched the career. Yes, it launched Charles Lawton's stardom and his relationship with Elsa Lancaster, who's also in the movie. It also launched his career as well. So we've talked about that before, but he was the one behind that, and he's definitely worth mentioning. Good cast is worth repeating. This is a United Artists picture, not a Universal picture, by the way.
Right.
And finally, the director, William Cameron Menzies. He started his career doing special effects design for Famous Players Lasky, which, while that name doesn't sound important, maybe a little weird, it would actually evolve into Paramount. So Famous Players Lasky, which is a weird name, turns into Paramount eventually.
I like that.
Humble starts for a company as big.
I like that name better, honestly.
You like Paramount better?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
The other one sounds like a community theater program, but keep going.
Yeah, and so due to his work on The Adventures of Tom Sawyer a year prior to this movie, or to the movie I'm going to mention, the producer hired him, the producer for the movie he's about to be hired on, hired him for Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
Very high praise it must have been for Tom Sawyer, because he got hired for Gone with the Wind. And it was so great, in fact, the producer apparently had to coin production designer, because he told everyone he had final word on how the movie looked. And it indeed looked amazing. And he was like on the, like the Georgian fire exploding, whatever it was called, scene.
Yeah, there's a scene where Savannah, Georgia, I think is going up in flames, and yeah, it's a really good
and he
shot.
was on that. This was really high praise for this director, dude, who did design on such things. And it's just Gone with the Wind is like amazingly cinematography, and he had final look on the picture of the look. So if it wasn't for him, this movie could have looked inferior to what it is today.
That's true.
High praise for him. So that's all I really have for today. But there's a lot of interesting stuff on the table, and it's interesting to see like a movie written by H.G. Wells himself. I think he did actually try to direct this movie, but he was like, I don't know how to do this. How would we go hire a director? It would have actually been more fitting to keep his name if he managed to actually direct this movie, though.
Right.
But to keep that H.G. Wells things to come on top. But again, as we said, there's lots of scope to this. There's lots of, great eye candy, model work, and effects that are just really cool for that one particular scene we're talking about. There's a lot of political and philosophical, predictions that a lot of them came true. A scaringly accurate TV prediction as well. There is a lot on the table here with this picture, and I didn't realize it would be as much of a classic, reputedly, as I thought it would. So it's like, oh, this is upheld with, like, one of the great science fiction movies of 1930, in my opinion, along with, like, and also, like, British as well. Because this is, like, what science fiction movies do we have in 1930 as...
In this decade?
In this decade. Like, there's The Invisible Ray, there's, like, this movie, and then there's, like, what? There's, like, not too much.
A lot of other ones ended up being very monster movie kind of things, and they could very easily be put in that box of monster movies.
The horror movies where it's like monster movie horror, or
even King Kong and stuff. But the thing about this movie is that it is unabashedly science fiction number one. It doesn't have any kind of monster movies tropes. It is a sci-fi movie,
and it is also on an epic scale as well. So again, if you like 2001: A Space Odyssey, if you like Metropolis, even if you like Doctor Who, if you like British science fiction shows, well, I mean, the 1970s serial looks a lot like Doctor Who, if you know what I mean.
Sure, I could see the Doctor, showing up in the world where the chief rules and there's a wandering sickness. He could show up.
Yeah, that would be a cool Doctor Who episode, honestly. Or a Twilight Zone episode, too.
Yeah.
There would also be an episode where he would time travel to a point that there were, like, a couple aliens watching the Earth die, or the universe die or something.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what this sort of gives off to me. But again, both the movie and the book, strangely enough, have very ambiguous endings. Especially with, the book going, like, it ended off on, like, the middle of a sentence, and it's like, well, this is where the notes end. Well, I don't know how humanity's gonna end up, but it's probably gonna be cool, I guess. I wish he finished it, but it did say finito on the end he put in his notes. So
right.
He's like, okay, it's finished here. That's weird. It's very weird. And then, like, in the movie, he's like, oh, what is the future gonna be when the man is off to space already? And
what
so what's
shall
gonna
it
become,
be? What shall it be?
What shall it be? What shall it be? If you enjoy these types of films, you're definitely probably going to enjoy this movie.
Yeah, and you can find it.
If you enjoy good characters and an actual, like, plot with characters and, like, conflicts and stuff, it's probably going to be a little dry on plot. It's more of, like, seeing the epic scale of things unfold that I enjoyed about this movie.
And the ambition of not only of design, but of ideas.
And what it tried to do in its place in the history of cinema.
Yeah, and it's inspiration for future things as well. Because
and for things to come.
For future things to come.
Speaking of things to come, something else that is going to come is our next segment of the episode. So after the break, we're going to hop into that and enjoy dissect what the plot actually is. Although again, it's just there's a war. Then there's a plague, and then humanity gets taken over. Really, so there's not too much.
And we shoot shoot ourselves like a bullet out of a gun.
And then we fire out of a space gun.
Yes. Again, the second time a space gun shows up, albeit a larger one than we saw in
H.G. Wells is inspired by Jules Verne. I do agree, but the Jules Verne is more on a predicting technological achievement, and he's more of like predicting a political achievement, but that's another side.
That is true, yes, and I will be going over the plot after the break and going over each point. I'll try to do it in as much detail as possible, but I will be counting on you, William, to fill in the blanks and fill in the little bits of the brick in between. So
all right, see you then. What will it be? What will it be?
What shall it be?
It shall be a break music.
Thank you for hanging with us through the break. We are back to the rest of our episode today, where we are talking about things to come. The H.G. Wells penned somewhat epic, I think.
The massive scale, written by H.G. Wells himself movie. Like, as I said, I called him a science fiction juggernaut for a reason. And this science fiction juggernaut actually going ahead to push for a movie's being made and even writing stuff for it's just amazing to see that. I didn't know it was until I looked at it. I was like, oh, H.G. Wells wrote this himself. He wrote the screenplay. So
yes, as you had mentioned,
when the mastermind himself goes toward making something, like furthering the production of a movie, that's something to behold.
Yes, I will say that he is first and foremost. I will tell you, I'm going to give you the other side of the coin. First and foremost, H.G. Wells is a writer of novels. He's a writer of material, and I get that. But there's a visual storytelling, and you see hints of that, but I wonder how much of that is Vincent Corda, who's the production designer, and how much of that is the director himself.
And the visual storytelling comes in with, indeed, the first part of this movie, the first section, which is, it's Christmas, 1940, and there's bombing starting to go on. There's war going about.
Yes, the city is called Everytown, but it's obviously a not very subtle metaphor for London. I
actually noticed, sort of looking back at screenshots, I was like, wait, is that St. Paul's Cathedral in the background?
Yeah, it's honestly it's any town USA, but it's England, basically.
It's any town USA, but I'd actually love to see this set in as a real town, because I love the way it looks, and especially the set and model work and all the stuff. This is a huge set. This is a whole different town. There's a big sign. There's like all these things.
Hey, William,
in this
you're making
opening
me want
shot.
to take us, you're making me want to take us on a trip to Universal Studios where we get to go walk through the sets and.
I don't think they'd have the things to come set for this
of
because
course
that's
not.
United
That was,
Artists. I don't know
well,
if
and
United
it was-
Artists is owned
well,
by them.
No, and it was England, so you'd have to go to a lot of the British studios.
And, well, as we'll see later, they destroyed this set.
They did they?
No, I mean, it gets bombed.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. All right, so in this opening scene, we get we know it's Christmas, obviously, because we got Christmas revelers. We've got the music in the background, the Christmas music.
And this opening shot just tells you the scale of how big every town is, and this
It's
is
pretty
just...
big, yeah, and it feels real. It feels
Imagine
real.
a Frankenstein mansion room. It's bigger than that.
No, yeah, it
Imagine,
is.
like, a town square shot from, like, I don't know, Battleship Potemkin? I don't know if there's any good, decently sized sets in this regard, but, like, it's big. It is, like... Yeah, it's like a amusement park sort of sized.
Well, if you thought this was crazy, if you ever see like some of the Batman movies later on, the modern '80s ones, these entire cities are like on a set.
Yeah, it's like exploring Pleasure Island from Pinocchio. It is sort of look like this amusement park sort of set and model for this every town. The way it is right now from this opening shot. I was like, wow, it's way bigger than I thought it would be.
Well, what did you like about first off, we're hearing music, and we're hearing they're playing Christmas carols and things like that, but part of the song like shifts the keys to kind of almost sound like kind of get the because in the background you've got the city is bustling, people are busy, like children are smiling, there's crowded traffic, but you get posters and newspapers in the background with messages about a looming war, and nobody's really paying attention to it, you know?
There's lots of billboards and stuff around it in Comic Sans font, as loud as you can see it. War is coming.
Do you think there's going to be war? Do you think there might be some war in this movie?
I wish I could have wrote down all the messages that they said, but again, there's so many.
Yeah, war scare, and it's very quick. This movie's got lots of montages. This is a montage movie.
This is a montage movie, but I think this was actually how they advertised war back in World War I, is with these kind of billboards. Like, they'd hang around your side, droop down to, like, pants level, the top would be at waist level, and people would be around with, like, these billboards, like, war on them, and like display them around. They'd be on buses and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's lots of propaganda.
There would be heavy propaganda in World War II prominently.
There was things called metal drives where they basically would say, everybody collect all the metal you can, because all the metal that we gather you can send that in, and they'll melt that stuff down and use it for tanks and armament and stuff like that. You see a little bit of that in, I think it's Captain America, the First Avenger. You see a little bit of that World War II propaganda.
But this is World War II from a World War I standpoint, because again,
right, because it didn't
World
exist
War II
yet.
didn't exist yet.
That's very chilling about this part, because it's very spot on. Because think about this. Every town, aka Britain, is getting bombed, and we talked about this in the production part.
They predicted the year that Britain would actually start getting bombed by Germany.
They just missed out on the part where they thought that the war was going to continue. Now the thing is, if you see this movie as prophetic, that's great. But think about this. Okay, let's say World War II ended, because of course it did. But what if this war, if they're saying war is going to keep going, and they were right, because you got the Korean War. You've got Vietnam War.
Cold War.
You've got, the Cold War. Of course, you get the War on Terror. So, some people will even call that forever a war, because, not to get too political, but a lot of people in the military-industrial complex want to keep, war going, because war is profit. War is money.
Speaking of war bringing profit, this really brings up this question I have here. Does war further progress, sort of like it did in real life, forcing humanity to create an event so that they may live, like, tanks, missiles that can carry humans to space, or like H.G. Wells' opinion, where it halts progress, humanity gets nowhere by it, and it gets to space 1,000 years ahead of where we actually did. Well,
Yeah. So war connected to rocketry, connected to the aerospace, connected to astronauts, and then we get Velcro. So war's not all that bad because we get Velcro Ultimate from it.
that's hilarious. We get our Nike. We can't have our Nike shoes without World War II.
Oh wow! Hey! Winged victory. Nike is the goddess Winged victory. So think about that.
Oh, that's interesting.
And victory does come on wings in this movie, so we'll get to that later.
There's either the idea that war forces progression of humanity through, you need to be bigger and better because you're in the middle of a war. You need to get all you can in technology to be able to actually win the war and stuff. You need to get a metal drive and start making stuff. Or, like in H.G. Wells' mindset, where war halts progress.
Yeah, and the voice of H.G. Wells you hear many times spoken through John Cabal. I mean, John Cabal is the character we'll meet in just a moment, and you hear a lot of H.G. Wells's rhetoric and a lot of his beliefs. Kind of, like you said, John Cabal is the mouthpiece for H.G. Wells a lot, if you think about it.
So yeah, like the Lord of the Rings, the mouthpiece of Sauron.
Right.
Imagine what John Cabal would be if he was just a mouth.
Oh, disgusting.
But it was sort of his opinion. It was H.G. Wells' opinion that war was something that halted progress because you were in the middle of a war. You couldn't do much of anything in World War II, I think especially. Maybe even World War I as well. I don't know which war, any war. The woman had to take up a lot of the workforce because the men were out. And so that sort of halted economics, all the things, because it's like you have half the population working on stuff.
Well, think about this. Economics did go forward because a lot of the manufacturing of planes, tanks, bombs, and such, we actually got really, really good at creating those weapons of war. But those same techniques that got better and better through that were able to be applied to things like automobiles.
But then again, he's also of the opinion that we wouldn't get into space until 1,000 years after in real life we get to space.
Right.
Due to the halting of humanity causing such a technological stagnancy that we wouldn't be able to get to space because of this war going on and devolving the humanity and the plague and whatever, which we'll talk about later.
Right. So
let's get actually into the house of John Cabal.
So John Cabal, he seems to be a scientist, but I think he also has training in being a pilot. You see on his wall, there's a picture of a plane. So we kind of go, okay, is he a pilot? He's worried about the chances of war, while some of his other friends are there, and of course they dismiss the idea out of hand.
So basically, Cabal is on the pessimistic Wells side of the argument versus Passworthy, who's on the optimistic Holiday Spirit side of the argument.
While Shepherd walks their flocks by night, all seated on the ground. What's the matter with you fellas? All that. This little upset across the water doesn't mean anything. Threatened men live long and threatened wars never occur. Another speech by him. I tell you, there's nothing in it. It's just to buck people up about the air estimates. Now, why meet wars halfway? Why not look on the bright side of things? You're all right. Your business is going up. You've got a jolly wife, a pretty home.
All's right with the world, eh? Passworthy, you should have been called Pippa Passworthy.
Pippa Longstockings. I mean Pippa Passworthy. Sorry.
I mean Peppa Pig.
Peppa Pig. I don't think his name is Pippa, but I think that there's like a stereotype or either from a book or something where it's named Pippa, and he says you should be called Pippa, but we get into that in a minute. Passworthy then kind of leads him a little bit into singing a Christmas song.
But if he could just get over his doubt in mankind, which was permeating through that, and see what actually happened in real life, which was that man actually is still alive, but it didn't need a dictatorship over the air to survive. And we probably won't for 20s or years or stuff.
There's little kids in the house, and they're playing with toys. They're like war. They look like little soldiers and cannons. Isn't that interesting how we just have kids that play G.I. Joe, and then you have war going on at the same time? Interesting.
Wooden soldiers was back in somebody's day. I don't remember what the exact person who said that line was, but he said that, I remember back in my day we'd play with wooden soldiers, and now they're playing with plastic ones.
Right. At the end of the day, John and his wife, played by Sophie Stewart, hear guns in the distance. Like they go outside and they hear guns. Is that guns? And then they see the searchlights going up overhead, and they are right. War has come. So the mobilization of troops replaces all the Christmas cheer Trucks and motorbikes begin to swarm the town square. Loudspeakers on Jeeps are demanding that civilians go home.
Well, rather, they're people with loudspeakers.
Okay, right. They demand that the civilians go home and that gas masks are distributed. Now, if you think about it, the gas mask thing, that makes me think of World War I a lot, because in World War I, you got the mustard gas and stuff and things like that, and gases.
And so he's like bringing that in with going like, get a gas mask, either go home, or if you don't have a home, go into the underground.
Yeah.
The London Underground with all the trains in it and stuff.
That's true. And during World War II, people did go into strangely enough, did go into the London Underground to avoid the bombings up above. So it's very prophetic. But they are getting crowded. In a short time, John and Pippa are off to do their part marching into battle. I think that John is going to be, it shows him in the plains shooting down stuff. I don't know what exactly Pippa, his part to play into. You see the little drummer boy playing the drum, and you see the shadows of the soldiers. I thought that was really, really creative.
Yeah, there was a little scene with soldiers walking by during this war coming about, and that is very reminiscent of, like wartime cartoons, PSAs, whatever they would be, that would come about of World War II, is these walking soldiers into battle.
Yes, the newsreels. Yeah, and and you would see that. But I also thought of just the way in which you show those kind of news on the march things.
Oh, speaking of which, we did forget to mention that when they had been seeing the war, there was also a viewing of the war on a flat screen TV. Now, when did TV get invented? 1950, although it was probably invented somewhat during the war, but didn't get very too much far because the war was happening, 1950s was the television, when television was invented.
Well, in the 40s you had some televised things, but they were like very limited. They were like, this particular thing is going to be shown, and then nothing else gets shown for
Now, we did have movie theaters, they did use projectors onto, flat screen viewing. That was how they did it often.
Yeah, this is much different with the cathode.
Yeah, CRT, cathode ray tube televisions, yes. But that was sort of like, well, maybe we can go one step further and have our own little portable thing. And that was what would come about 20 years after he made this movie. So it's fantastic that he would predict the usage and exactly the look of 1950s TV screens.
Science fiction can, like we talked about before, can predict, but it can also inspire people to actually create the things like Star Trek and flip phones,
Yeah, but this was probably the artists that really thought up a lot of this, because this only really appeared in this movie, though. But good props to the artists. Apparently they were, inspired by the same artist that did the Metropolis stuff, which is funny, because he said he didn't want to do Metropolis, and is like, we're going to take inspiration from these dudes.
Anyway.
These dudes are they didn't work on Metropolis at all. They're just Art Deco people, But no, they were Art Deco people who worked for Metropolis.
They were inspired, absolutely, and they used it before. So, war does break out. Every town is reduced to rubble.
Yeah, and there's all these great explosion shots, especially exploding this big cinema sign, and then the big plasticky tanks, and the soldiers, and then the flocks of warplanes. Man, it's crazy.
The real British people that watched this movie in the theaters, they would have to become accustomed to that rather shortly, because the prediction for the start of the next World War was only off by 16 months from the making of this. So months later, Cabal, now Royal Air Force airman piloting a Hawker Fury, flying the not-so-friendly skies as he dogfights with an enemy bomber played by John Clements. He shoots the man down, but then gives him some comfort. He's saying, why do we have to murder each other? And you know what?
Yeah, there's gas around down at the bottom of this field, which is honestly, I remarked on how well this shot was placed over here at this field set. And, there's, they're pulling out their gas mask, but it's hey, take your gas mask, because there's, a random lady that comes out.
Oh, it's a little girl that walks by.
Just randomly out, and it's you deserve the gas mask. The guy who's dying doesn't get a gas mask. The other two.
It's not super random, because the pilot, for the dying pilot, just for a moment, he kind of thinks it's ironic and kind of a joke that he might...
Wait. You know what happened?
Yeah.
On Christmas in World War I? When the Americans and the Germans, for Christmas, they stopped fighting to share Christmas?
Yeah, there was the no man's land Christmas situation, yeah.
It's funny how we can have another moment here, near Christmas. you realize again in this moment that soldiers, they fight each other, but they can also have the capacity to care for each other. I just thought of that, and I was like, huh, that's an interesting way of expressing that, having seen it before in World War One. Sort of an interpretation of that happening. Yeah, you can be a soldier and fight against the enemy, but they can also have the capacity to care for each other, especially.
They're humans too. We're humans.
We're all humans, and plus you can sort of empathize with them in a way, because, you know, war's hard on both sides, you know? Regardless if you are on the quote good side and the quote good evil side.
Right, so the war continues on into the 1960s. You get these 1955, 1960, 1966. You get those flashing
there's
across
good
the
use
screen.
of like 3D text. Like at the beginning when it shows off the things to come logo, it's like 3D text, and then here you have 3D text and shadow like lifting up, which is very creative. And like these
before actual 3D was.
I mean like 3D dimensions, like lifting up. That's what I mean. But like these little things where it's like, you know, a little snapshot of what's going on, and like
so but the war has been going on long enough so people actually might have forgotten why they're even fighting.
Wells thought that the war would exhaust society, man. So this is showing how like the war goes on and on and on and on and on. Supplies would definitely probably die by now, definitely after a while, but it's like they probably had to like exhaust a lot of supplies in order to do that.
Yeah, it's almost like the new Dark Ages. You actually see they're wearing very ragged clothing. So almost every city in the world's in ruins, economies are devastated, and there's very little technology left apart from weapons of war. By 1966, the enemy's armies and navies have been defeated.
And their sleeveys?
Yeah.
The armies, the navies, and the sleeveys.
But they have greatly depleted air forces still. There is a pestilence known as the wandering sickness. It's inflicted by the aerial bombing and chemical weapons that people are using, and it goes unchecked, essentially turning inhabitants of the poison gas-soaked regions into zombies that walk around aimlessly.
Poison gas-soaked regions. More like radioactive regions?
They are in a mindless-like state before they die, and it's a condition that reminds you of the reanimated corpses and zombies of later films, okay?
Not that they haven't already been introduced. Go watch our White Zombie episode.
White Zombie episode, yeah.
If you haven't seen the first
If you
zombie
dare.
film. If you dare!
So those infected with the wandering sickness, or I call it zombieitis, and they're shot on sight. You see Dr. Harding. He's older. He's still played by Maurice Bradell. He's now desperately working on a cure, one that isn't a bullet, with his daughter Mary. But they don't have a lot of equipment, and it feels rather hopeless. And now, ladies and gentlemen, The Wandering Dead. So now we're moving on to 1970. World War II is still sputtering on. So H.G. Wells, you were kind of a little bit off on that. That's okay. But now it's like low-intensity local tribal warfare. It's post-apocalyptic future.
Yeah, we haven't seen that before, and will we see a post-apocalyptic movie again? I don't know. Can you name some on the top of your head, actually?
When I think of post-apocalyptic movies, I think of things like
Mad Max Fury Road, obviously.
Yeah. Well, let's see. There's Omega Man with Charlton Heston that came out in the 60s. It was the late 60s, early 70s. I do remember Planet of the Apes movies. We will. I don't have any off the top of my head right now, but I can.
But it's interesting to see our first post-apocalyptic feeling film as we get into the second section of the movie. The first one was like wartime. The planet is exhausting itself. But post-apocalyptic has this certain feeling about it that is captured by this. You know, this rugged, town out in the salt flats. People are scrambling to survive.
You've got cars pulled by horses.
It's, okay, watch...
That feels like Mad Max.
Watch the Lego Movie 2. Watch the first 5 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes. That's exactly what they're going for. This post-apocalyptic, ruined world because the sisters, aliens, massacred the whole country, basically.
Yeah, it feels like Dark Ages, Stone Ages, very balkanized. You've got, these new countries that are kind of growing up. The smaller, but they're very, very tribal, like us versus them. And we'll see that in just a minute. So the plague has pretty much killed almost half of humanity, and the last vestiges of what you could call a government, a centralized government, those are extinguished. Life is now very more primitive. Flying has ceased. Clothing is like very ragged. It's very medieval looking. So every town is now, we could almost call it Newtown. Every town is now ruled by a despot bully who calls himself the boss, and I think we also hear him called the chief. I made the mistake of saying that the guy who played the boss or the chief was the same guy who played Theodocopoulos later. That's wrong. It's Ralph Richardson. By the way, we will see Ralph Richardson a couple other times. We also will see him, I think, playing a wizard in a movie called Dragon Slayer, many seasons to come. But we do see Ralph Richardson in some other films going forward, and we'll mention those later.
Oh, right, there was a funny moment around here where he's like, I love how my car can go like 3 miles an hour, and I was commenting about this, like...
That engine turns over still. Why, I remember when I was a lad, when it was new, we thought nothing of going 100 miles in it. A whole 100 miles. Less than 3 hours I've done it in.
So 3 miles an hour?
Wow.
Oh, because it's horse-drawn.
It's horse-drawn?
It's horse-drawn. That's why he's going 3 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
And then finally, when the shot zooms out, I realized, oh, it's a horse-drawn. Obviously, It's going to be 3 miles an hour. So that's hilarious. That was a hilarious moment.
I definitely did like that when I first watched this. I was like, yep, there you go.
Yeah, but overall, this is really just, post-apocalypse. Everyone is inside. Maybe there's, this is probably not to the point of, plants growing in a cityscape. It's not anything like that. It's more sandy. But there's, lots of old-looking people. There's, this butter churner-looking guy, or girl. I don't remember how exactly the scene was laid out, but it would have been funny if there was a butter churn. They're all, looking for supplies, airplane gas, fending for themselves in the wild, and maybe even, Westerns can also have this feeling of, entering a town that's trying to survive in the middle of the outback west sandy areas as well, which is sort of what post-apocalypse sort of goes for, except it's more lonely than a Western. Western is more, confident in itself. That is a William analysis of Westerns, I guess. Civilization is not at an end in a Western, but they're certainly isolated.
Yes, the first movies we're going to see him in quite a few seasons will be Dragon Slayer and Time Bandits, where he plays the Supreme Being, basically God. But we'll talk about that later. All right, so the boss, he looks a lot like Benito Mussolini in the way that he carries himself. Of course, Benito Mussolini...
Yeah, I just looked up the picture, and I did compare him looking more like William Shatner, which is funny now that he's compared to Mussolini. That's is William Shatner Mussolini? I don't know. I mean, he's still alive, so I'm probably not going to say anything else behind his back. Let's continue.
Right. So like you said, the boss is desperately searching for gasoline and engineers who can repair his old planes so he can take up the fight with these mountain soldiers who are hounding his rule. The enemy or the causes of the war are never really brought up except for maybe talking about...
Yeah, the book mentions specifically, Germany, Poland, I don't remember specifically where, the dictatorship of the air was placed. It was someplace weird that started with B. There's lots of different areas.
Bavaria?
No.
Oh, okay.
Obviously not.
You said B, I thought Bavaria, right.
But, I don't know if it mentions Afghanistan existing. It mentions all sorts of countries that exist in real life, because obviously it's that. But this movie is sort of going for a localized around every town, which is this town could be your town. We don't know what kind of town this is. We're gonna call it town, area, place, location, vicinity.
I almost want to call it Bartertown from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. So Rudolph is his name as well. So Rudolph became the chieftain of what is left of every town. He eradicated the pestilence by pretty much shooting the infected.
We do see a couple of family, a woman and a man sort of existing, and then the mother comes in. She's ill or whatever, and then she eventually comes out with the wandering sickness. She just has to escape her clutches of her bed, so she goes out and gets shot, which is basically showing how much society is shoot them, anyone who walks into town square. Town square is empty. Anyone who walked out. But now it's more like post-apocalyptic. Everyone is more in the town.
So they are trying to obtain coal and shale to render into oil for these ragtag pre-war biplanes that he has. He has no issues with murder because he's constantly wearing fur. That's kind of a joke. The boss is an anti-intellectual, nationalistic, neoconservative stand-in.
I don't follow.
He's a George W. Bush type.
I still don't follow.
That's all right.
I need history lessons.
That's okay.
Man.
So he really wants technological superiority over his enemies, especially with air travel. But everybody knows that no such technology exists anymore. The combatant state demands miracles. The boss wants airplanes, but his chief mechanic, Richard Gordon, tries to explain to him that even if he can fix the planes, they have no petrol or gas, really. No petrol to fuel them. Also on the agenda is getting local scientist Dr. Harding, he's still around, to develop poisonous gas, but Harding and his daughter refuse to aid in the deaths of even more people. Then they hear something in the sky. They hear this it's a plane. No, it's not Superman. A sleek new monoplane lands in every town.
Yeah, at this point when they see it flying around, they're just, the immediate thoughts are like of jealousy. It's like, hey, we were trying to do stuff and about, but we didn't know that they already had it coming, so they've already developed planes. Well, we're just stuck here on this rock.
The boss has got the jealousy. Everybody else is like, wow, how cool. He's the jealous one. So the pilot who comes out is an elderly John Cabal. He's 30 years older, but he still looks really sharp. He's wearing this black rubber flight suit.
And he has a helmet that is much taller than needed for him.
It's way bigger than anything
What
ever.
are the designers thinking? It's a very interesting design, honestly, and it appears in the posters as well.
It's the most memorable thing.
But he only wears it for, like, 5 seconds, because as you know with modern movies, as you know with that Halo series, characters that commonly wear masks don't end up being good in Hollywood, because you want them to take off that mask because people want to be recognized for their acting work. They want to be more expressive with their face and be recognized as an actor. People want to see the actor's face. People want good acting.
Mandalorian, I would mention that as well. He does take it off some, but the majority of the time he is wearing the helmet. But in this case, he takes that helmet off rather quick. He emerges out of his plane, and he proclaims that the last surviving band of engineers and mechanics known as World Communications have formed a civilization called Wings Over the World. And I was like, wow, W-O-W.
And again, that's much, much, much less blunt than the dictatorship of the air, which was a very
It's also got another name, the Brotherhood of Efficiency. That sounds like a cult.
That sounds like something that Magneto would join.
Yes.
The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
The Brotherhood of, well, yeah, in the X-Men movie, he says the Brotherhood of Mutants. He doesn't say evil because he doesn't think what he's doing is evil. The Brotherhood of Efficiency, Wings Over the World, they are based in Basra, Iraq. That's
what it was.
And they have outlawed war and are rebuilding civilization throughout the Near East and the Mediterranean. John Cabal is scouting the land to assess the savage tribal communities that replaced civilization. Cabal and the boss have a conversation where the boss says, "And now for the 4th time, who are you?" Cabal says, "I tell you, wings over the world." But the boss says, "That's nothing. What government are you under?" Cabal says, "Common sense."
And especially over this point, the boss guy, whatever his name actually was, he's advocating, he's like, this is an independent something state, where it's like talking about he's fighting for democracy in his country. He's being an independent
sovereign state
in society, but he's the other side is that John Cabal, the side that H.G. Wells is focusing on, is the socialist, communist sort of side, where it's like, no, I don't like democracy. I think at the one point John Cabal says, I don't like democracy.
We don't approve of independent sovereign states.
At one point, which is funny.
Yeah, he wants somebody smarter to come in and tell everybody what to do. And I'm like, I'm sure that Hitler thought he was the smartest man in the room.
To quote a certain Marvel movie, I know socialism is a charged word, but...
Right.
Because that Quantumania, Ant-Man Quantumania.
Ant-socialists, right.
Ant-socialists, that's hilarious that it's applicable here. Go watch, we actually sat down in the car and, gave our thoughts over Ant-Man Quantumania, so that's actually worth checking out.
It'll probably be out, it's already out on the audio part of the podcast, but the video version might be out by the time you get this episode.
Yeah, go check that out. That was really, really fun.
That was fun. That was fun to do. Whatever you think of the movie, good or ill.
Socialism is a charged word, as we were saying.
It's still a charged word today. So as a member of Wings Over the World, or the last trustees of civilization to counter the warlords and the perpetual petty fighting of these people. This seemingly alien pilot is met with expected hostility by the chief and his right-hand woman, Roxana. We do see a lot of conversations between Roxana and Cabal.
You know what I just thought?
Yeah.
John Cabal is basically saying, the future is now, old man.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Do you know what that's from? Malcolm in the Middle. Do you know what that is?
I do. I grew up watching Malcolm in the Middle, yeah.
But that there was a character who said, the future is now, old man, and that's basically what this movie is.
Yes.
So what's next?
Cabal says...
So that's the sort of man your boss is. Not an unusual type. Everywhere we find these little semi-military upstarts robbing and fighting. That's what endless warfare has led to. Brigandage. What else could happen? But we, who are all that are left of the old engineers and mechanics, have pledged ourselves to salvage the world.
And he's talking about how, the transport industry came together and actually is trying to lead this dictatorship of the air wings over the world idea.
Yeah, Cabal offers them the opportunity to join them in rebuilding the world. He promises...
law, sanity, science, all these great high things that H.G. Wells had. I mean, he wrote science fiction. Obviously, he thinks science is of the highest regard.
Yes, that needs no bosses or independent sovereign states, but just people who put their faith in science rather than in the boss and his kind. So the boss has Cabal arrested and it demands that he aid him in his war effort. But the Cabal will have none of this because Wings of the World is founded by scientists and engineers whose goal is to wipe out independent nations and thus end war forever.
Yeah, this is where he says, democracy, and how about no?
Right. Naturally, the boss wants to prevent Cabal from taking away his power.
However, Roxana is actually like, you know what, I'm rubbing up to John Cabal's ideas and is eventually gonna go and try and, rescue him or whatever.
I'm not a stupid woman. This is a small, limited world we live in. You bring in the breath of something greater. Skies, snowy mountains, blue seas, sunshine.
She's the only one who knows the, quote, right way of thinking. And everyone else is stupid, basically.
Right, so Cabal is forced to work with Gordon and Harding in the repairing of the decrepit Air Force, but it's all a trick on Gordon's part, because the moment the plane is fixed, he flies off to Basra, Iraq, to notify Cabal's people of their leader's capture, and here's a really cool scene. In our reaction, we were just flabbergasted with what you could do at 1930s, movie-making technology.
But look at their huge plane.
Look at that thing.
I'd love to see that drive around, and that'd be a first.
Some nice.
We might not get some giant monsters, but we're sure gonna get giant airplane.
Yeah.
There's 15.
Look at those things.
And we saw earlier how huge they were.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Da 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 da.
Yeah.
Da, da, da. That's how big.
Yo.
Dude, just think about how big those are.
And those are probably regular sized clouds.
Look at those dials.
Regular sized clouds. And they're the same size.
Look at the dials on them. They're we could have a little, little thing that's this big. No, we got the altimeter is the size of a room. We do everything big here in the world of communications. And they're fighting biplanes, these little World War II biplanes.
Don't you realize how big those are? You're not knocking those things down.
That's like flies against the eagles. Look at those suckers.
Yeah, so Wings Over the World has these mammoth flying fortresses appear. These
so mammoth.
Big airplanes. The boss orders his piddling Air Force to attack, but the aged planes inflict no damage, no HP lost.
Imagine if Universal Studios at Orlando, Florida, obviously, I think that's where that is.
Yeah.
Universal Studios could fly. Just like Avengers Age of Ultron, the Sokovia flying. Imagine both of those, and that's sort of what the planes are at this scale.
Oh, okay. You know what these look like? These look like helicarriers from S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, speaking of which, there were helicopters in this movie, and I don't think they were invented for another 3 years, so that's one up for them, although those were sort of coming into the design space as they're asking around. So,
well, remember how we were talking about when traditional war was happening for so many years and gas was bad because the poison gas, chemical warfare, the wandering sickness. Well, guess who uses gases too? The Wings Over the World. So they are attacking and they start dropping peace bombs on the populace. The bombs contain a harmless knockout gas So once Cabal has been rescued, the town wakes up to find itself in the hands of new rulers. The boss warlord is dead, but did he shoot himself, like I said earlier in this episode, or did he have a fatal allergic reaction to the gas? I don't know. But Cabal says that he's dead and his old world dead with him. And he says, and now for the world of the Airman and a new start for mankind. He explains plans for global consolidation by Wings Over the World, and the people in every town awaken to the birth of a new planned society of reason.
And then the best part of this movie for your eyeballs, we sort of compared to the beginning of the old Willy Wonka, because that part is just absolutely...
It is
mesmerizing chocolate making, but I compared it because it's sort of making a factory assembly sort of process of every town being recreated with the Wings of the World.
They're assembling
design.
a city, and it's very intricate. And I marveled at what they could do back in the 1930s, just with model tech, because we see a lot of that later in a lot of the kaiju movies of Japan and Korea. But going forward, this just looked really cool. Like I was like, that's really awesome. Now,
yeah, we'll play all of our reaction here, just like absolutely surprised at how awesome this sequence is.
That's awesome. Like, I love the scale. I love the scale. They're showing it like these are huge.
Yes.
They always make huge things.
Little guys that big.
Yo, look at that!
Miniature work.
Like it's like bumping up and down.
What did they film?
That's cool looking.
They filmed that inside of an engine.
That must have been huge.
Probably not. They probably filmed it close.
And now you have your Charlie and the Chocolate Factory style like
right.
panning.
That's right.
All the turbine engines.
Look at how small. The scale of this movie.
Yeah, they're huge. What?
What could they do with this movie in CGI? It'd be insane.
The Helix stairs?
Yeah.
The dude who did the special effects, I'm gonna give it up to him. This was awesome looking.
1936? This is crazy good.
That's like Willy Wonka
How long
looking.
did that take? It took forever.
Oompa Loompa Scoopity Doo.
Oh, there's your bubbles.
We're gonna make society better for you.
Look at that. How big is that stuff, really? I mean... Oh, wow. Somebody built all that in 1936.
I didn't realize it would be this awesome, but I'm like, this movie is awesome. Like, the scale of everything.
You know what this reminds me of? Is the later Godzilla movies in the 60s. Whoa, is that the city? That's the city they're building in the background.
We built this city.
Look at it's almost like those are floors in like a hotel. Think of it like a hotel. Each one of those little strip things is a floor.
Like a floor for a whole hotel.
Look at the little miniature work.
2036, every town.
Is it just been cleared out?
You look at the camera shot. Look.
That's a miniature. That's all. That's miniature.
I can see where they probably would have cut the line, but look at that.
They built most of the town underground. Looks like.
It's like built into like a little fissure. Look at the
Whoa.
Yo.
All that work. That's
like just considering
look at the little cars going. Dude.
It was just so great, man.
It was.
You had to watch it to believe it. Actually, I think it's still... There's a lot of copies of it on YouTube. However, a lot of them are low quality because being public domain, they had to make copies over copies over copies. You know?
Type in the letters HD when you do your search. I found one that was really good. Okay, so this long montage of these great machines that are blasting out underground caverns and they're constructing a city beneath the ruins of the old.
And there's like all white, modern, sleek buildings and skyscrapers like twice as big as they were in 1930s, except underground, interestingly enough. They build into like a ravine sort of idea.
So in the last part of this movie, it is set 100 years after the beginning of this movie.
All these statues, pre-made light, sort of modern lights we'd have today, you know, those glowing lights.
Yeah, I kind of made the joke that this was Krypton.
Yeah, and there's like giant statues, and there's like elevators that are like really fast. All this stuff with just models. They have to build all this and make it all like work.
So it's like how Phoenix rises from the ashes. That's what this is. It's rising from the ashes of primal ruin to be something amazing. So it's 2036. Mankind is stable.
And they're inside of a ravine, which, wait, actually that's really interesting, because it's like, wasn't there like a line somewhere, or like, I don't know, you can think of it's like, aren't buildings like sort of made to get away from the ground, yet we're building underground?
Right. So civilization is devoted to peace and scientific progress. In this, the technology that they were using to make this movie is like matte paintings, double exposures,
lots of models and sets of all sorts.
It's a lot crazier than 1927's Metropolis.
Look, dude, if you want something on an epic scale, which we haven't really seen any large scale science fiction stuff until like, I don't know, like I think Destination Moon is actually a really large scale one. That'll be...
That's in the 50s, yeah.
Yeah, this is the 50s. This is like one of the earliest large scale science fiction movies we've got.
Yeah, and that scale didn't...
And if you want that scale, you need to have all crazy work in the models and just,
yes.
Oh my goodness, was it so pinned together.
They bought it. I mean, so what I mean is that this movie had such a budget that it went over budget, and probably that's why you don't see these big, huge science fiction movies for at least probably another 20, 30 years.
Sort of like Ben-Hur in the 1920s, which was like $4 million, man. That's another epic as well. But H.G. Wells wanted this stuff, so my goodness, did he get it.
Yeah, everything's spotless.
And so is their skinny legs.
Oh, here we go. They are wearing these bizarre Roman togas, and it looks like, tunics made out of cardboard with wide shoulder pads, and they're wearing skirts.
There was one moment where Dad said if it's the progression, more like progressing up their thighs.
What happened to pants? Did pants have progress? They're progressing up his thighs, bro. We have to put that in. Any more progress, and we're gonna see something we don't want to see, bro.
We don't want to see your tighty whities. And if you wear long johns, despair.
Look, the cape is like Thor length, and he's Superman length. He looks like the Jor-El from Superman, and his legs are all hairless and
wait, what? Why is his chest showing?
It means vengeance.
Progress. His shirt.
Progress. We need to see the side of his chest so the ladies will go humana.
Humana. Progress.
Yeah, the skirts are getting shorter on the men than they are on the women. It's very odd.
But anyway, there's like all the things. There's like TV screens around.
Widescreen TVs, like LED flat screens, and they're talking on two-way wrist radios.
So what do you mean H.G. Wells predicted 4K? Well, he predicted 4K.
Yeah.
Well,
I think Dick Tracy predicted the two-way wrist radio. So maybe this movie predicted Dick Tracy. So now there's no inequality, but there's no democracy either, right? So people spend all their time watching TV and strolling in the air conditioning shopping mall. How is that different than our current world? So there's this little girl, and she's talking to her grandpa, and he's giving her a history lesson. She says,
Horrid, I don't want to hear about the wars, the wandering sickness, and all those dreadful years. None of that will come again, great granddad.
Well, not if progress goes on.
They keep on inventing new things now, don't they? And making life lovelier and lovelier.
Suppose I'm an old man, my dear, but some of it seems like going too far. This space gun of theirs that they keep on shooting.
we do have the artist Theotokopoulos.
Is that a dinosaur?
It sure is a Latin name. I've probably pronounced it two different...
Theotokopoulos.
I've probably pronounced it two different ways.
We did mention that it was going to be Ernst Theissiger. So he represents... Let's talk about this real quick. He represents the modern-day equivalent of Luddites. I'm going to tell you what Luddites are. But in this movie, they are artists and others that are unhappy with all this dehumanized progress. And they feel the new world is too white. Oscar's so white. And there must be an end to all the progress. So you go back to living instead of preparing for living. And H.G. Wells is having an argument between science and art. The artists, for some reason, rise up to protest against the well-planned society.
Well, I mean, he has particular ideals for, like, these certain people will rise up in the industry to do this. Like, the transport industry, would really anyone else think that that would be the people to make a dictatorship over society? Really? Nah.
Welcome to, we're going to do like a little mini documentary here on what Luddites are. I'm going to go through real quick. It was a secret oath-based organization of English textile workers in the 19th century. They formed a radical faction which destroyed textile machinery. They are believed to have taken their name from Ned Ludd, a legendary weaver, supposedly from Ansley near Leicester. Ned Ludd was probably fictional, a Robin Hood-like figure to shock and provoke the government. They protested against manufacturers who used machines in what they called a fraudulent and deceitful manner to get around standard labor practices. The Luddites feared that the time spent learning the skills of their craft would go to waste as machines would replace their role in the industry.
Yeah, but Thetacopulos would basically, he's starting to put the seeds of rebellion in the hearts of the people, as, you know, that there's this space gun about, which I don't think was in the book, but I might have to check because I haven't actually read all the way to the end.
It's very Jules Verne in the way it looks, if you remember the cannons from the Earth to the Moon, which
Jules Verne had like a whole idea of like we'd take like a train or something up there as well. So
yeah, that of course that's another thing as well. But yeah, a lot of the progress is symbolized by this space gun. So if you think about it, it's a weapon of war, a cannon, right, or a gun that's also used for progress. So it kind of echoes some of the things we talked about early in the movie.
Yeah, because they're about to go to space and stuff, and that's what they're planning on doing. But Thetacopulos is sort of like, he gets on this big widescreen monitor out in the middle of the place, sort of like holograms sort of idea.
Yeah, and he says that this progress has to be halted by destroying the space gun.
He's like, stop this progress, put a stop to this progress. Everything is bad because of progress.
Well, do we have any characters that we know? Yes, we have John Cabal's great-grandson, Oswald.
Because Cabal's dead at this point.
Yes, of course, by many years.
But he's played by the same guy.
Yeah, of course a lot of these characters are. Cabal's daughter, Catherine, is one of the two lunar-bound space pioneers. Oswald Cabal is a benevolent dictator, basing his rule on science and equality. That's Wells' vision of a perfect world. A plutocracy of the wise and good instead of a government by the wealthy. A plutocracy is a government of the wealthy, and they're talking about the wealth of intelligence, the wealth of philosophy.
And then there's also Maurice. Maurice the Baguettes.
Yeah, Maurice the Baguettes. But Maurice's father is Raymond Passworthy, played by Edward Chapman again.
And they're going up to this space gun. They're gonna go shoot themselves into space. Whether it's really safe or not, they haven't tested.
Yeah, Oswald Cabal learns that Theotokopoulos is going to lead an attack against the space gun.
But there's this crazy models for this huge, like, space gun, and they sort of predict how sort of a rocket in 1960 would sort of be arranged. It sticks up into the sky, and then they get lifted onto it in a bullet in the movie, though. But sort of the same idea of like having to travel upwards into it.
Yeah, so you get this mob that's starting to form, and they're rushing to destroy the space gun.
Around and around and around.
Yeah, and then this action forces Cabal to launch it ahead of schedule. They've got these metal-like clubs, and they look like a Frankenstein movie, where they got the torches and stuff.
They're finally through with the progress. Although, again, the book, they wouldn't ever really be through with progress, and it really would just waste away bloodlessly. But again, yeah, they shoot out of the space gun. The people rebelling couldn't manage to actually stop them, however much they tried, which is interesting, and also it makes this sort of useless rebellion, but still.
Cabal and Passworthy are looking out at this last scene. They're looking out to the stars.
Then we play the final speech here.
But for man, no rest and no ending. He must go on, conquest beyond conquest. First this little planet and its winds and waves, and then all the laws of mind and matter that restrain him. Then the planets about him, and at last, out across immensity to the stars. And when he has conquered all the deeps of space and all the mysteries of time, still he will be beginning. And if we're no more than animals, we must snatch each little scrap of happiness and live and suffer and pass, mattering no more than all the other animals do or have done. It is this or that. All the universe or nothingness. Which shall it be, Oswald? Which shall it be?
So basically, this speech is going, do you want to be with the turtles, or do you want to be with the rabbits? Do you want to be with the poor people who aren't progressing, or do you want to progress with society, basically? Which is sort of like the ending argument usually for any political speech that often people are like, do you want to be on the losing side or the winning side? The easy way or the hard way?
Like a lot of Wells stuff, it's got a lot of grand and important ideas and philosophy, but plot and characters do take a back seat to that.
Look, here's a question for you. What do you praise a documentary for? Here is the answer to that question in my belief.
Okay.
It's gotta be the visuals. Yeah, you can't really praise it for, like, the plot and stuff, because it's like, oh, I really loved how they talked about the polar bear, and it's like, what? You can, like, review its plot, and it'd be really dry, sort of, or it's like, oh, they reviewed a bunch of animals, and then talked about global warming existing, and that's it, really. So, most often, you praise a documentary for its visuals. You praise it for the things that it shows, for how beautiful they are. You could also probably praise it for its music that was composed along with it as well.
Editing.
And editing as well. Composition. And that is what was big in this movie. The model work, the set work, all the visual things, the special effects, as well as the shot composition, which leads into the cinematography as well. All of this is the visual element. And for that such, against, the people who would think that, oh, I don't really want to watch this because it's very dry plot, I would recommend you watch this movie. It's got a lot of visual feats for the eyes, and I would recommend watching it for the sake of, it has historical value, it's H.G. Wells written himself. I would recommend that you watch this, contrary to maybe even your belief, Dad. I don't know what your belief is.
I think this is worth watching, but I will tell you this, and I don't say that it's a terrible movie. What I'm saying is the TV shows like Star Trek and other films that would come out 20, 30 years after this, they really started bringing up some very heady stuff, very philosophically heady, but still at the same time, the plot and the characters and the actors really captivate. So this is a very prophetic movie. It's very stylistic and stunning in its visuals. It's really worth watching, and it's not super long.
And it's on YouTube as well in many places, although again...
Public domain, I think, in a lot of places.
Public domain in certain half of the globe, as I'll say, again. We talked about the globe earlier, that's hilarious. But I would recommend watching it. It's everywhere available. Though, it's sort of underrated in the aspect of recommendation, because it's like no one really knows this exists, because people more know about, The Invisible Man and War of the Worlds, some of his other more popular science fiction works, instead of his later works, and at this point his movie. I didn't even know that this existed. I didn't know that it was written by H.G. Wells itself. And most importantly, I didn't know that the visuals would be as good as they would be. I was sort of surprised by how good that they were.
Well, I think a movie that has this level of scope and over the years, the next one that would really that I would compare this to would be 2001: A Space Odyssey, because it's the only thing that I know of that could approach the scope of what it's trying to tell from the dawn of mankind to the future and beyond. It's crazy.
Yeah, but however, there is sort of like, people who are like, if you want, like, definitely some good visuals, definitely, if you want great storytelling and, like, all together well-polished stuff, you could go for Citizen Kane. I mean, that's sort of like, it has an epic scale sort of as well, covering a whole man's life. It has, like, some really good characters. It has some great visuals and, like, the way it flows and stuff. And like, the cinematography's pretty great.
It's all in service to the story.
So it's like, if you watch this and you think that it's dry enough in plot, then you can sort of get rejuvenation from something like Citizen Kane. But it's weird we're comparing things to come with Citizen Kane, the reputed best movie of all time.
This movie is worth watching, whereas I think that H.G. Wells is really good with philosophy, prophesying the future. He's a very theoretical guy,
especially later in his years.
Yeah, it's good, but I think that there are some other movies that do a lot better with showing and not telling, and he's more of a teller, I think. But this movie, like I said, this movie is worth watching.
However, our next movie that we'll be doing is Dracula's Daughter, the sequel to Dracula that I don't think really anyone asked for too much.
Right.
But I, again, haven't seen that either, and I'd love to see if that sort of, does it live up? Does it hold on its own right? Does it, what is it even about, really?
At the best, it'll be okay. At worst, it might be like what they did with Son of Kong, where it was rushed out. At least it wasn't rushed out, because this is 6 years...
At least they put some effort into it.
5 years after the original Dracula came out in 1931. It's supposed to take place right on the heels of 1931's Dracula. So, yeah, take that for what you will. But we'll have to watch it. It may be influential in other ways that we may not, have foreseen. But, yeah, we're kind of going from, epic sci-fi, which were like... We were shocked by that, and then we're back to kind of the Universal monster movie stuff. So it's going to be like we woke up from a dream, and we're back in the real world with a lot of these monster movies for quite a while. But...
We were in a proposed fantasy, and now we're in another proposed fantasy, I guess, but less proposed and more invented of fiction. Versus things to come that would almost belong in the nonfiction section if it wasn't for the fact that it predicts the future that didn't even happen yet.
Yeah, and this thing is with things to come, it was definitely a herald. It was saying, Jason and William, you guys are doing a lot of Universal monster movies and kind of early science fiction, but here's something that is way ahead of its time. Okay, now back to your regularly scheduled monster movies.
Yeah, here's a bit of United Artists published work, which I don't know who owns United Artists now.
It's actually a conglomeration of different people forms.
But
United
who did
Artists.
United Artists go to? Did it go to Universal eventually? Did it go to RoccoW or something? Maybe it went to Disney.
UA was around for quite a while.
I actually predicted it went to Disney, but I don't call me on that.
So join us next time for Dracula's Daughter. Thank you for joining us for Things to Come today. Keep subscribe, give us likes, give us comments, engage with us. We love it.
It's funny only now we say subscribe, but yeah, we do have a YouTube channel up. We just had to.
You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast.
You can subscribe to our ideas and our wonderful things we say.
Absolutely. And have a good day. Onward to the future.
To infinity and beyond. Thanks for listening to Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. Click here and here for some more excellent content. Hope you'll enjoy it. See you soon.